Welcome to today's Explainer. Let's get right into it. Today we're unpacking two absolutely chilling sources that show exactly how isolation and the uncanny can be weaponized against us. We're looking at a haunting narrative from a Hindi source set in a totally desolate railway station, and contrasting it with this terrifying modern encounter out in northern Arizona. Both of these accounts really hit on a primal fear. What happens when the things we trust most turn into our absolute worst nightmares?
So, ask yourself, what do you do when the threats outside look and sound exactly like you? Both of the stories we're diving into today explore this very specific type of horror. It's not your standard monster jumping out of the closet. No, it's way worse. It's a deep psychological manipulation that happens when the threat wears a familiar face.
Part 1. The Ramganj Station Mystery.
Okay, so our first story centers on a young woman named Ashika. Now, she lands this railway job entirely through nepotism. Her dad pulls some strings, and she gets the gig even after showing up late to her interview and literally taking a seat from a much more deserving candidate. Not a great look, right? So she's posted to the remote Ramganj station and is told to head there right away. But when she arrives by train late at night, the whole vibe just shifts. It's pitch black, completely deserted. The station master's office is locked tight. As she's sitting there all alone on this bench, the isolation really starts creeping in. And then, out of nowhere, this unsettling old watchman appears and offers to open the filthy, abandoned office for her.
Once inside, Ashika starts complaining about the broken TV and how gross the office is, but the watchman just drops this incredibly ominous warning. Very casually, he explains that the previous officer actually suffered a gruesome death right under a train, and the police had completely sealed the place off. Oh, and to make matters worse, he mentions a local woman also took her own life on those exact same tracks, so the locals completely abandoned the station because they're convinced it's haunted.
And here is where we get this massive, terrifying bait and switch. The watchman makes an excuse to leave, saying he absolutely refuses to stay in a haunted station. Fair enough. But right as he's walking out, his phone rings, and you'll never guess who's on the other end. It's the real Ashika. She's calling from the city to say, hey, my plans changed, I won't be arriving at the station until noon tomorrow. Imagine the sheer terror that must have dawned on that watchman in that moment. Because if the real Ashika's on the phone, who or what is sitting inside that office?
Part 2. A Ghost's Vengeance.
To understand what is actually in that office, we really have to look back. Just 2 months prior, a man named Ramesh passed the railway exam with flying colors, just dreaming of giving his daughter a better life. But days later, because of that deep-seated corruption we mentioned earlier, his rightful job was handed over to someone with lower scores but much better connections. Totally heartbroken, Ramesh leaves a note and dies by suicide. When his grieving wife, Geeta, goes to the station demanding justice, that very same watchman we just met heartlessly pushes her away. Unable to bear it all, Geeta throws herself under a train at that exact station.
So, the entity in the office? That's Geeta, and her karmic vengeance is completely systematic. She goes after absolutely everyone involved in ruining her family. The source notes she started by taking out the corrupt officer by driving him under a train. And now she's cornered the complicit watchman in the dark, choking him to death for his part in her misery. But the revenge isn't over yet, not by a long shot. She literally waits all night to intercept the final piece of this tragic puzzle. The real Ashika, the girl who stole the job.
And we realize the danger is far from over when the real Ashika finally steps off the train the very next morning. She is completely oblivious to the absolute bloodbath that happened the night before. She's warmly greeted by Geeta's ghost, who chillingly masquerades as the new station master. And Ashika just willingly follows the entity right into the office, completely unaware she's walking into a trap set by the very woman whose husband died for her job.
Part 3. The 3:13 a.m. Alert.
All right, let's switch gears. We are trading the physical isolation of a rural Indian railway station for the isolation of a modern American home in northern Arizona. Just imagine getting a blaring alert on your phone at exactly 3:13 in the morning. It reads, "Emergency warning. Do not respond to voices, lock every door, do not make eye contact after 3:15 a.m." Our protagonist initially thinks it's just some hacker pulling a sick prank. I mean, emergency alerts are supposed to be for flash floods, right? Not instructions to avoid eye contact? But that little bit of false security evaporates fast, and things escalate into sheer terror within minutes. The tension ramps up perfectly using the rule of 3. Right after the alert goes off, the protagonist hears 3 slow, methodical knocks at the front door. Just knock, knock, knock. They check the security cameras. Nothing, absolutely nothing there.
But then the terror shifts because the next set of 3 slow knocks doesn't come from the front door. It comes from the bedroom window. Carefully checking the window reveals a sight straight out of a nightmare. Standing motionless out near the trees is a doppelganger. It has the protagonist's exact face, the exact same clothes, the exact same smile. It's not moving at all, just staring right back at them. And right as they are processing this absolutely horrifying visual, the phone vibrates with yet another emergency alert.
Part 4. The Uncanny Mimic. So this new alert simply reads, "Do not look outside." But it arrives just a second too late. Right as the protagonist reads those words, the uncanny mimic outside slowly raises its hand to wave. And then, the entity moves from visual mimicry to targeting their ears. It starts cycling through incredibly familiar voices. Downstairs, it sounds exactly like the protagonist's mother saying, "Open the door." The catch? The mother had been dead for 3 years. Then it shifts. It uses the best friend's voice, then the sister's voice. But the ultimate violation? That happens when the creature finally decides to use the protagonist's own voice. It perfectly mimics them, whispering, "I know you're watching," right before all the modern defenses the protagonist relies on just completely fail.
The escalation here is just rapid and totally relentless. Instantly, every single light in the house goes out. The security cameras lose their signal, completely blinding our protagonist. Then, the silence breaks with these slow, heavy footsteps walking directly up onto the roof. The source describes the horror peaking with the sound of scratching directly on the ceiling above the bed, followed by one final whisper from above, "Come outside." Part 5. Nowhere is truly safe. When we bring these two narratives together, we get this brilliant contrast in how fear is actually weaponized against us. In the first story, you're trapped in a desolate physical location, forced to face the inescapable sins of the past. There is literally no one around for miles, and Gita's ghost uses that immense geographic isolation to pull off her revenge. But in the Arizona story, you're isolated in your own modern home. The entity cuts the power, kills the cameras, and uses the very technology you rely on to isolate you right before dropping that supernatural mimicry.
In both of these sources, the ultimate horror relies on presenting something that seems totally human, but is fundamentally deeply wrong. Gita seamlessly plays the role of a friendly station master to lure Ashika right into the trap. The Arizona creature literally steals the protagonist's face and the comforting voices of their loved ones. In both scenarios, the entities trick their victims at the exact moment they are most vulnerable and completely cut off from the outside world. So what's the big takeaway here? It's the realization that monsters do not always lurk in the dark shadows. As humans, we are hardwired to trust what's familiar to us, the voice of a mother, the welcoming smile of a new colleague. But sometimes, the true threat is standing right there in plain sight, weaponizing the very faces and voices of the people we trust most, turning our absolute safest havens into inescapable traps. So, look around you right now. Really think about it. If your phone screamed with an emergency alert at 3:13 a.m. tonight and the power instantly cut out, whose trusted voice would the darkness use to coax you out of your bed? Keep the lights on, and we'll see you in the next explainer.